So hi and welcome back to part 2 of domain 4. This year we're going to go into the threat intelligence side of things, which is obviously one of the largest parts of the XOR platform, and obviously one of the most important because that's what we're attempting to do. Gather as much intelligence as we can and obviously put that to use, because intelligence is nothing unless you can enforce it. So for the exam, for the PCSAE, you're going to have to describe threat intelligence management capabilities. So I mean that's the gathering of intel, indicators, exploration, aggregation, and then being able to share it with others. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go through indicators, show you some indicators, what they are, and we can have a look around and work out how to remove ones that we know, how to enrich ones that we have got no idea about, and then sort of how to expire ones. It should be noted that once the indicator's expired, it is still available in the system. You can search it, so on and so forth. It just doesn't come up as an indicator anymore within instance. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, I think, is have a look at sorting out like we've got here. We got reputation good. So we don't really want like 8 coming up in instance, because there's no point. It's noise, as we said before. The whole idea behind this is to tune out noise. So we'll click into it. And we can see immediately where it is. If indeed that's where it is. And we have the geolocation, we have the AS number for it. We can enrich it, but it's already been enriched. So what I'd be tempted to do is just put a note in, a comment in at the bottom. Okay. And then we need to delete and exclude it. So we're deleting it from the we'll expire it first, sorry, because you can see it's active. Expire the indicator, and then we need to delete and add it to the exclusion list. So to exclude this indicator for all indicators, delete and exclude. Okay, so that's cool. Basically what that means then is that once we've excluded it, it won't then feature in incidents. IP. Then we're going to add the exclusion reason. And then hit delete and exclude. And then automatically we've got the indicators not available, it might have been excluded or deleted, which of course we know for a fact it has. So coming back here, what we want to do is we want to try and find one that hasn't been further enriched. Okay, so we've got this one. So we've got this IP address and it's active. We know it's down as being bad because Alien Vault reputation feed says it's bad. There's a timeline for it, so we know that on the 27th it was removed from the feed. It was removed from the Alien Vault open feed. It was cited 414, and then we can see how its entire timeline back when it was first cited, and it was removed and cited and removed. Okay, so we need to go and then enrich the indicator. So that then runs it through the other enrichment integrations that we've got. As you can see, you've got spam cop, IP info, and then if we click into these, we can see why Barracuda's given it that, because it was found on the Barracuda block list. and the indicator itself. So I'd be tempted just to leave that as it is. I don't think we should expire that. I think that it will expire on its own. And then we have the different details. So we have the ASN and the country and the geolocation. So now going back to the good indicators. So for instance, take this one, which is my gateway. You can see we've got the reliability of the different people as well. So we've got the A+ reliability. So in the system of things, if you have, say, SpamCop, which is A+ reliability, as opposed to Alien Vault, which is C, which is fairly reliable, it will take the reputation score and verdict from the most reliable source. Where you have two sources of equal reliability that disagree on the verdict, so if you have two that are A+ and one says good and one says bad, it will take the worst verdict. That way you're always sort of erring on the side of caution. But in this particular instance, we know for a fact that this indicator is my gateway, so we don't need to look at that anymore. And it is an IP. And we're going to delete and exclude it. So now from here, we now can see that it's gone. Okay, and then you would do that more and more. So you can see you've got related instance 13 for 1111. We know that's DNS, so there's no point having it there. So we just carry that out again. And that way you start to clean up your XOR instance. And once you get to the point where you are only then seeing in incidents, you're only seeing indicators that are relevant, it makes it a lot easier then to go through and add the comments and do the threat hunting and look through it, because you're not spending time reading through stuff that that isn't relevant. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly go over the feeds as well. So this is the Alien Vault reputation feed, as you can see. It says when it was last run, how many indicators it pulled. Now it's 100 indicators. The Alien Vault reputation feed is a lot larger than that, but with the community edition, it limits it to 100 indicators per feed and 5 feeds. So clicking on there, clicking on the show commands, you get the commands for the integration itself. So if we were to do a Alien Vault get indicators, and then it goes off and we've got 100 indicators there, full table in the new tab, full artifact in new tab, because it hasn't got, well, it has got room, but it hasn't got room because it's limited to 50. So those are the current indicators. So as well as being able to do that, as well as being able to pull indicators, we can also export these to be used in other types of SIM or anything like that, or to create a block list or so on. So anywhere you can import CSV or anything like that, you can export this from and then import it into there. So to do that, you'd go to the full table. Takes its time, give me a second. And then we can see there we've got the indicators. And we can also download as a file, or we can export it to CSV. And if we just open that, we can see that we've got comma separated file that we could then import into another program. So that's how we can share information across. Welcome back. So in this section, it's part 2 of domain 4. We're going to look at indicators, we're going to look at the threat management stuff, and we're going to look at engines and how we monitor and how we run integrations within air-gapped or sensitive areas such as DMZs, where we don't want a lot of traffic coming in and out on ports such as SNMP and things like this. We can retain that then within that environment, providing further segmentation. And of course, segmentation is literally what this is all about, yeah? So when you're enforcing the zero trust security model, you've got to understand that zero trust is literally non-negotiable. So we don't want SNMP allowed into our environment so that we can monitor anything, but we still want to be able to monitor it. So with XOR, what we do is we deploy an engine into that area. That engine then gets a HTTPS connection, SSL connection, back to the XOR instance. All that's encrypted, and then we can run our integrations and commands from that engine using our XOR instance, and we can also log to that, and then those logs will appear in the XOR instance. So essentially what we're saying is, and then with D2 agents, we can also then run analysis, we can run any kind of forensic work that we need to on those particular boxes that are within that. And all this means is literally then so where you would previously have, I don't know, a vendor such as SolarWinds that would be polling the servers within that environment, or they would be SNMP trapping out, or there would be lots of communication on lots of well-known ports, and there's lots and lots of different issues with those. You would then be exposing only, as a general rule, your front-end web server, and then usually behind that you've got back-end database servers. So you can say you're then really restricting the access in and out. So let's begin with indicators. So indicators. So kind of part of the whole threat intelligence thing is the indicators. We talked a little bit about the indicator feeds previously, and when we start to talk about indicators, we start to talk about IP addresses, URLs, reputations. We're starting to talk about files and so on and so forth. So we'll just quickly run through these slides to sort of give you an idea of, as it says, the ingestion, status, expiration, exporting, and more. I bet you're literally on the edge of your seat, aren't you? Okay. So, indicators. They can come from feeds, instance, or imported from CSV, JSON, or text files. So, whilst obviously the aim is to import these things automatically or by process, you can pull them from other instances. You can get email feeds and things like this, and then they'll go into a CSV or a JSON file, and that can be imported manually. This can be done automatically. You can do it through feeds, or it can be done through an instance that's created, and then you upload a file to that. Okay? There are many, many ways of getting indicators into XOR. So the practices around indicators, obviously, is we want to make sure that what we're looking at, as all this is designed to reduce noise, because it's in noise that people can come in and they can start to compromise things, because we can't see them. You can't separate the noise from the bad actors. So we need to control whether they're active or expired. An expired indicator is still within the system, but it is not then it's not flagged as an indicator within an instance or an incident or something like that. And you need to define how and when the indicators are expired. So for instance, are you going to expire them over time? Are you going to expire them by virtue of a feed that then says, okay, this indicator is no longer valid? Is it going to expire then? That type of thing. Okay, so with Smart Merge, because you have, as a general rule, you'll ingest feeds, and then an instant will come in, or you'll create an instant, and that that incident will then be enriched. The data will be enriched by one or more integrations. I would venture the opinion that you're probably going to have a lot more than one integration that's going to be doing the enrichment. So Smart Merge ensures the same indicator is scored correctly. So even if it's come from multiple sources or methods, it understands that that is the same indicator, and it makes sure that you get the best information, as opposed to a lot of really complicated, difficult, disparate information. Just to quickly run over that again before I go on to this next one that I've clicked on too early. So that again, as we say, so if you have a feed that's got a reputation of A++, and you have a feed that's got a reputation of C, it will take the reputation. If those two reputations differ, you will be presented with the reputation that was provided by the feed with the A++. Okay, and again, as we said before, where you have two reputations that come back from integrations or feeds that have the same reliability, you will get the worst verdict if they differ. So if an A++ says it's good and an A++ says it's bad, you will see bad, because that's the worst case scenario. If we work on worst case scenarios, then the worst thing that happens is that we defend against something we didn't need to worry about. The indicator timeline is the default section that displays the indicator's complete history. So this is in the indicator summary layout. Okay, common indicator data model. Regardless of source, the ingest indicators have unified standard set of indicator fields, including the traffic light protocol. So, is it good, green, not sure, or could be dodgy, sort of grayware sort of area would be amber, and then obviously bad is red. And then you have feed-based jobs that can be used to trigger playbooks on feeds when a change in the feed is detected. So if you have, say, Alienware, as we said before, the OTX feed, then when that feed is changed, the job will pick up the fact that it's the feed has changed, and that will trigger a playbook to then go and remove the indicators that have been expired by the feed or are no longer in the feed. It'll expire those indicators, or it'll add indicators that have now been added. Okay, so we're going to have a quick look at the different pages. And so this is the indicators page, and it's a summary page that we was talking about. Covers new and old indicators, along with their respective verdicts, as you can see. So you've got active indicators there, the type that it is, and what it is. It also covers the good indicators as well. In my case, I've only ever found it covering my internal IP and broadcast IP. So you would normally want to take those out anyway. But that's where it is, and then you can do your searches at the top. Remember, it's the Lucerne language for searches. Okay, so moving on. So once you click into the indicator, you can look further into the data that's held on it and carry out further enrichment. You can carry out the enrichment there, enrich the indicator, or expire the indicator. If you go to expire the indicator, it asks you why you've expired the indicator. For a reason. You can tag it. You can see where the indicator originates from, for the geolocation, the sources of it, and there we have the reliability you can see as well, and where it's from. So sorry, that was complete rubbish. I'll start again. So you've got the source of the indicator, which is alien vault in this particular case, the reputation, which is bad, and then the reliability of that source. So that's C, fairly reliable. You can see as well at the top here that we had some, it was enriched against, or all the integrations I've got for enriching IP indicators. So I've got Barracuda, SpamCop, who is an IP info. None of those had a reputation against it. So the reputation that's been shown is bad because that is the only reputation, despite it being a C, fairly reliable reliability for that indicator feed. Okay, so the feed integrations, that's what we're talking about, the alien vault reputation feed. Feed integrations pull indicators from threat feeds, such as alien vault. Of course, it is important to remember if you're on the community version that these are limited to 100 indicators and 5 feeds in the community version. Of course, that means that the vast majority of the smart merge and the requirement to expire indicators is sort of less, if you know what I mean, because you haven't got so many of them. But then if you imagine, say, with MIME meld, just my MIME meld with 5 miners, I believe, is still running at around about 1 million indicators. So at that point, once you get to 1 million indicators, and of course with XOR, it's a lot easier to add feed integrations and so on. So you would probably end up with more. And at that kind of level, you really need a reliable way of cutting through what is and isn't relevant and what is and isn't active. So then if we move on to the use of indicators. So indicators can be consumed by any vendor. So one of the real things I like about XOR is that it is still technically vendor agnostic. Coming as it did and being under the hood Demisto of course wasn't a Palo Alto company. So you do have the ability to integrate this with everything that is already within your environment. So it will integrate with anything that can consume an external dynamic list. Checkpoint consume external dynamic lists. Fortinet do things like this. So that's where it says Palo Alto PAN-OS EDL service, but you can publish external dynamic lists and be consumed across anything. Of course, you can also export them manually, as it says there, through JSON, text, or CSV. And that means you can then move them into anything that you want to, anything that is going to allow you to import a CSV, text, or a JSON file, which of course is basically, in today's world, everything. Moving on to the incident view. This is where we see the good reputation for the IPs, because this is, you can see there the broadcast address and my network address. So with these, I would be not expiring them, I would be deleting them. So you would exclude the indicator, you'd put in a reason why the indicator is being excluded, and then it will be removed from any further incidents. Okay, so that really is that's the end of the indicator talk through. Troubleshooting is next, but I say I'm going to do it a slightly different way, because I'm going to install an engine and then we'll go through hopefully some troubleshooting methodology with the engines. There isn't much in the way of troubleshooting methodology there, to be honest. It's fairly sort of straightforward, and there isn't much that can really go wrong because the script is created and then built on the server. Just as a side note, all the servers that are being built on Ubuntu 16.04. This is because I believe 20 is supported. However, I have had some absolute disasters with 20 that have had me sitting here scratching my head. And I mean, I am more than happy to accept that this is a lack of knowledge on my part, but it doesn't make for a good video if you're just going to sit there for 3 hours watching me try and work out why something isn't working. 1604 is the version that's being used at the minute. If you get to Misto and you download it, it goes onto 1604 box. It also works on Windows as well. So 1604 is, I mean, it's more than 1604 LTS is more than acceptable and easily made, sort of easily hardened, so it's secure. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to installing an engine, and I'm going to use my instance of XOR, and I'll just quickly talk you through the web server that we've got, which is nothing special, so don't get too excited, and we'll talk about the environment and why we might need to keep everything effectively air-gapped, but not quite. Okay, so let's getting the engines done now. The web server that we're going to be protecting, or rather the web server that is going to be now false DMZ, that's in my lab, is here on 203.12, so don't get excited, it's just Apache default page. Okay, and our scenario is basically in our DMZ we want to allow as little connectivity into it as we possibly can. So in or out of it, we don't want SNMP, we don't want syslog, we don't want anything, NTP, anything that could potentially be used against us. However, we do need those services in there. So by virtue of the engine, we are going to provide monitoring. We're going to provide the ability to be able to run integration scripts and commands through for any troubleshooting issues or anything like that, possibly the deployment of D2 servers and so on, applications, sorry, without having any more windows open than we need, so as to speak. So here is my engine. All of it has to be done as root, otherwise it won't run properly. We're going to go into vartemp because that's, I don't know, it's just habit. It's just where I sort of download stuff to. Okay, and we are going to create the engine from XOR. So we're going to give it a name, which is going to be DMZ lab. Excuse me, and the installer type, shell is for script. Now that's done, you can see that I've got the ability to save it, which I will do. So that downloads it, and then we're going to WinSCP it onto the box that we've chosen for our engine. You have to make sure, of course, that your engines are up to the normal spec, because you're going to be running integrations on them and stuff like that. So they need to be 8 cores and 16 gig of memory, I believe, at minimum. Okay, so let's just WinSCP that to the box. Okay, so we're now on WinSCP, we're in the box, we're going to go to var temp, and we're going to copy this across. Nice and steady. Okay. Disconnect that session. Bring back our engine, or what is going to become our engine. And then we're there. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at how easy this is. So the configuration script has been created for us by XOR. We're going to make the script executable, otherwise we'll be here forever. Okay, and then simply as root, we're going to run that script. And sometimes this takes a while, and other times it doesn't. It all depends on just how quickly my box decides to work. And as we can see, it hasn't actually connected, so we're going to purge it. So we get rid of that. Just wonder if there's an old version on it somewhere. Yeah, there was. So there was an old version on this, probably from me practicing this over and over. So that's why I didn't connect. So there you go. So that's an interesting thing. Here's an even more interesting thing. Here's something else that I keep doing, and I'm going to leave it in because I think it's too easy for people to claim that they know everything about everything, and they make YouTube videos, and then you sit there thinking, well, do you know what? I had this problem, and I had that problem. So no, this issue is because I'm a bit of a donut. So, going to get rid of what it's done so far. It's going to fail to execute, and that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to show you what I've done. So, Nano, because I'm not somebody who uses Vibe because it gets me tied up in knots. Try not doing it in... Okay, so my DNS name server's there. For some reason, I continually snapshot this server with the gateway as a DNS server because I have DNS proxy on every other network except this one. So that's fine. Right out. Restart the networking. To install it again, and amazing, really, isn't it? With DNS, all is saved. So that'll go through now, and that'll pull the Docker images, install Docker, pull the Docker images. You can see what it's doing. And then once it's done that, and once it's started the service, which it will do at the end by default, then we should see connected there. And then I'll show you just how easy it is to then, if you then need to pull that, if you need to pull that engine, you can pull that engine, and by using the purge, and it will disconnect, and then you can just run the script again, and it will reconnect. Any files, I believe, let me just check and make sure. So once you've lost connectivity with an engine, any logs from that engine are purged 90 days after that point if connectivity is not re-established. So you've got a fair amount of time before you start to lose any information from it. And of course you'll see from there anyway. So it's going to do what I thought it was going to do. So my ESXi box, as I've mentioned on many occasions, oh no, hang on, it's cracking on. Is actually running a little bit under spec, and it's massively oversubscribed. So I do have an issue where every now and then, if other boxes on that ESXi using any resources, it obviously grabs that. So hopefully I'll get enough money at some point to build a better VM server. But it's all learning, isn't it? That's what we're all there to do. And it's all progression. So I'll just pause this and just let this finish off. Okay, now I was actually trying to grab it just before it restarted. But as you can see there now, we have DMZ Lab connected true and connected since. Now if I just run now the purge, you'll see almost immediately we get the disconnect message, and it's disconnected, and then we can remove it. All is well with that box now, and then when we reinstall it, it will reinstall, it will come back up and it will it'll reconnect. Hopefully this time round, for some reason it does it a lot quicker this time round, and then there we go, and it's reconnected. So that's really what we're looking at with engines. As we go more into sort of 5 and 6, domains 5 and 6, then obviously we'll start looking more at it, and we'll start looking at how we can use engines within integrations. I will just show you, so if I just bin that. Okay, so if we now go to an integration and bin that off. Okay, so if we are going to, I don't know, say CrowdStrike, is that a good choice? And we can use an engine, and then we've got the lab engine there. So you can see now that that's how you use the engine. You can use the engine for syslog and things like that, and then that will log back to here, whereas before we'd have to have run syslog back to the Cortex XOR. Now there is other concepts around it, such as load balancing and load balancing groups, which we'll get more into as we go further on. But for now, that's engines, and that's also showing you as well a couple of times when it went wrong and what to do. They're very uncomplicated. The script's very good, works very well. It is all good. Okay. So for further troubleshooting on the XOR server itself, what we're going to look at is if we want to reindex the database. So the database is stored in var lib demisto data. Yeah, fair enough. But we can't do that, can we? So we'd have to go sudo data. Okay, so it's stored in there. In Demisto, you have to, so they've got Demisto DB and Demisto oid dx, and the way that you are told to reindex it is simply to stop the service. Okay, and I hope this works because this is on my what I would loosely term my production box. Okay, so we need to r-rf demisto dx, and that's what we have to do, and then we have to remove that. And I'm really hoping now, fingers are really crossed that, you know, when this comes back up it works. So systemctl start. Oh, bit of Palo news there. You can't go wrong there, can you? Start demisto, and hopefully, all things being equal now, if I come back here to my server, it will probably tell me to hang on because it's starting my server. So you'll see when you're starting, you get the meanwhile go and fight the dark forces because I'm restarting the service. Once that service is restarted, then I'll try and log in again. Although I suspect it may take a while if it's re-indexing, because I did have 186,000 incidents. So I'll just pause that whilst it's doing that. So the moment of truth now. because it's restarted. This is looking positive. And there I am back again with 186,000 unassigned incidents. So that's how you re-index the database should anything start to go wrong. Troubleshooting, beyond that, there's a lot of resources, and I'll leave the links again below this video. There's a lot of resources around the different types of troubleshooting. Really, the truth of it is, I guess, unless you are a dev kind of person and you're very happy and comfortable with Linux in general, I would imagine that you would probably follow the last lines on most of these things, which is to contact the Cortex XOR support team, or somebody like myself once I'm up and going. But the initial sort of troubleshooting steps are fairly easy to carry out, such as that for re-indexing a database. I mean, it sounds fantastic when it goes through a change record. It's, we're going to re-index the database on the XOR. So, you look kind of cool, and people think you've really, you've got your stuff under control. But ultimately, it's quite an easy and straightforward thing to do. So now we're going to move on to the next part of domain 4, which is how to create incidents. So we're going to create an incident from the dashboard by using this badger right here, a new incident, and show you, just show how that's done and the parts that they're going to want you to understand really for the PCSAE exam. Okay, so basically for the exam, you have to have an understanding, and we'll go into this in more depth later, but you have to have an understanding of the way that instances are created in Cortex XOR. Okay, so they're basically instances are just events that have been observed at a point in time for analysis. So that's what it is. So regardless of where it comes from, it's just an event. Okay, so first thing we can do, go to a new incident. Okay, we can set the name of the incident. Okay, we can use time and date, which is, might as well choose today. A reminder time and date, choose tomorrow. The owner, which is me. Let's say it's a low. The type of it, bad IP log. Let's say it's 8.8.8. The role for the incident, so who is going to ultimately be able to view it. This is what we talked about before. So, so this is what we talked about before, which is you can control who can see, who can interact with incidents based on the role that's assigned to that incident. You could run a playbook against this. So if we wanted to run let's say IP enrichment, we want to run an IP enrichment against it, and the phase is triage because we're triaging it. Okay, observed, not observed, observed during video. Okay, if you wanted to attach something, so if you had a file that you wanted to attach or something like that that was associated with it, I admit that isn't pertinent really to this. You can drop it up there, so anything you want to attach to it. So we want to create this new incident. And now we've got this incident, we can go here. So we can see we've got one low incident there, which is ours. This is our test incident. And if we go to investigate it, as a result of that, we can see that if we go to the war room, so here we've got the indicators. We've got There's no indicators in this, interestingly enough, because I have 8.8.8.8 is excluded. It's on an exclusion list. And then we go to the war room. There's nothing to look at because the indicator has been excluded. So that's one way of getting it in. If we go to the exclusion list, you can see I've got 8.8.8.8, and this is what we was talking about with excluding certain IPs. So within that instant that we created, there wasn't actually anything to look at because it had been excluded because we know about it. And this is where another part of instant creation comes from, which is if I can find it, the pre-process rules. So pre-process rules are basically, as it's ingested, before it's presented, you can create a pre-process rule to look for certain things. And if we look for that IP, we can actually create a rule that then stops that being created as an incident. Okay, now for the exam, basically that's all you really need to know about creating them manually. So for the exam, as I say, what you're going to need to know is you're going to need to know that it can be created automatically, or it can be created manually, as we've just done. And then it basically wants you then to understand the logic and the order of instant creation. There's not really that much to say about it, really. The understanding and the logic is the integrations. You configure the integration, so it basically claims that the logic and the order of instant creation is a 3-step process, which I guess it is. So you configure the integration, you configure integration of your third-party products, start fetching events. However, I mean, that also could be the manual as well. Classification and mapping. You need to classify the event, and then based on that classification, it becomes a certain type of incident. That incident has a mapping type to it. And then you have a pre-processing rule, as we discussed, which is to look through the incident before it's created. And this is where you save a lot of time in a virtual SOC, because you're now not investigating every single thing that comes through. Pre-processing rules are there for you to identify what you want to engineer out of it. So that's really it for domain 4. If I just check on here what 5 is. So 5 really goes over a lot of the stuff that we've already looked at, to be fair. So the content updates and content management, as we discussed. So the marketplace concepts, that's fairly easy and straightforward. This is here, marketplace. We've talked about downloading stuff. We talked about purchasing integrations. We talked about upgrading them. Product development lifecycle. Identify how content can be searched, and then describe relationship between marketplace and Docker. That type of thing. It is, again, it's quite an in-depth one. So I'm going to get started on that straight away once I've edited this and put it up. And I hope this is being educational, and I hope it's of some benefit to you and of some value to you. If it is, please like and subscribe. I try and reply to all comments when they're on. So if there's anything, that you thought I missed out, or there's anything you think I'm doing well at, or there's something that you think a separate video would be good to be made about, then just please let me know. And I mean, I can't respond to absolutely everything, and I can't suddenly drop everything to do videos, but I'll certainly try and do it as we go further on. So after this is just 5, and then 6, and then 6 is the final domain, which talks about 6 is like web interface, workflow, dashboards, and reports, that type of thing. Obviously, I might have to drop a bit slow on the reports, but it is the finishing one, and you see how easy it's to create a dashboard and so on. And then we'll just go over some sample questions and stuff like that. Okay, Right, so I'll see you in domain 5.